It's another edition of Time About the Movies, and today we're taking a look at the weekend before Thanksgiving 2002, November 22nd to be exact. We've got 3 movies to look at today, so let's go ahead and jump on into it. And we'll start off with, we've got pretty much a mostly sequel weekend, or mostly a retread weekend, especially considering what the last movie is. But we have 2 sequels here, but let's start off with the biggest of the bunch, and that is the 20th James Bond film, and the last one featuring Pierce Brosnan. This is Die Another Day. Yeah, probably not a good sign that I just showed you probably the best thing about this damn movie. Pierce Brosnan's 007 run started off on a very good high note with GoldenEye. Then there was a little bit of a disappointing follow-up with Tomorrow Never Dies, and then it was followed by the mostly forgettable, but not horrible, The World Is Not Enough, which now leads us to this movie, which I could still say, even after all these years, this is still the absolute worst Bond movie ever made. How bad is it? Well, let's count the ways. Die Another Day is the 20th spy film in the James Bond series, the 4th and last one to feature Pierce Brosnan, and in this one, he leads a mission to North Korea during which he is betrayed and seemingly killed, and after seemingly killing a rogue North Korean colonel, is captured and imprisoned. More than a year later, Bond is released as part of a prisoner exchange. Surmising that someone within the British government betrayed him, he attempts to earn redemption by tracking down his betrayer and killing a North Korean agent whom he believes is involved in his torture. And, boy, did they reference each of the preceding films in this movie, and there's no doubt in my mind, this is still the worst James Bond movie of all time. First of all, I mean, where do we even begin? Let's start off with the very beginning of the movie. They decided to add bullet time to the gun barrel sequence, like James Bond does the thing where he goes to the gun barrel, he shoots the gun off, but no, we just can't do that because we need to update this for 2002. I mean, no, we gotta have James Bond literally shoot the gun and then have bullet time and then have the blood come down. It's just like, I know it's a little bit of a nitpick here, but those little things that they add to this just like completely ruin the ebb and flow on this movie. And second of all, Madonna had a pretty bad 2002 with Swept Away and having one of the worst James Bond songs ever. I mean, this is an abysmal James Bond song, and Madonna is a good singer, but don't get me wrong, but this is pretty bad. Third, Bond in this doesn't come off as that charismatic, good-looking sex pod agent that he become known for. He's kind of more like Pepe Le Pew if he was a secret agent, because the way he has relationships with the main female characters in this movie just comes off as fucking forced. Like, especially with Brosnan and Halle Berry, who I thought was overall, she's trying her best here, and I feel like they were really looking for her to become the next big thing. I think they were actually planning a spin-off film with her as the main lead of it. Like, they're supposed to be the main love interest in the movie, and they share no chemistry whatsoever. And it's not really Halle Berry's fault or Pierce Brosnan's fault. It's just the script overall. And actually, now that I think about it, this kind of reminds me of how Daniel Craig was in Spectre, which that was a Bond that also felt like he wasn't that charismatic, good-looking guy that women would want to have sex with. He's trying to force those relationships onto him, and it's just like, it's just more uncomfortable than it is, what we expect from James Bond. Fourth, the constant references to the previous Bond movies. They cram it down your throat, and they're not clever in any way, shape, or form. It's only done because it's the 20th James Bond movie. It's also the 40th anniversary of the character. Now, look at what happened 10 years later with Skyfall. They were able to make references in that movie, but they weren't as forced onto you as they were in this film. I mean, this is reference porn in a bad kind of way. Like, this is how you not put references in a movie. And, fifth, the story makes no sense whatsoever. How this bad guy manages to reveal these new identities are so ridiculous. Not only because the film thinks that this film literally thinks virtual reality is a way of the future. A hotel made entirely of ice is a good idea, which I think Quantum of Solace kind of did the same thing the more I think about it. But you also have a giant laser beam, supposedly supposed to be the most badass thing ever. It's like, Austin Powers made fun of stuff like this, and, this makes the Austin Powers movies more like the James Bond movies of the past by comparison. And that's not a good thing. I mean, this is not good whatsoever. And sixth, you can pretty much tell this movie was afraid of those 2 franchises we've talked about before. The start of the Bourne Identity series and the CLIPLESS, which, yeah, it's the same movie, and, it's the Bond franchise tries to still show how cool it still was over CLIPLESS and fails miserably honorable terms. As much as I hate Triple X, I would rather watch Triple X again than watch this movie. That's how bad this movie is. Seventh, the Bond films are supposed to have the best action sequences ever, and here, it's like they're not even trying. There's a whole sequence where Bond is surfing on a glacier wave, and I swear, it looks like something you'd see in Happy Feet, rather than a James Bond movie. I was surprised I didn't see Animal Logic's name in the credits for the visual effects. That's how bad these effects are. So, do I even need to say more about how bad this movie is? This is literally the definition of a bad James Bond movie. Spectre was bad, but Spectre was at least trying to do something. Like I hate that movie. It's probably my second least favorite of the Bond movies, but I at least have to give that one credit for at least trying to do something with it. And it just didn't work out the way they wanted it to, but this right here is the absolute worst. This is the Batman and Robin of the Bond franchise. It's unbearable to watch. It's not even funny. It's poorly written, poorly directed, poorly acted. It's just an all-around mess. This is without a doubt the worst, absolute worst James Bond movie of the entire series, and it's not even close. I mean, Spectre is a close second, but I'm sorry, this still takes the cake. And believe it, I've talked about this on the Reviewing Network Live, as is a week after recording this particular episode. If you watch this later on down the road, but Quentin Tarantino was going to do a James Bond movie with Pierce Brosnan only if he would come back for it. Would that have reignited the franchise? Probably not. I mean, it would have been interesting to see what Tarantino could do with a franchise film like this, but of course that didn't happen. But maybe it was, of course, obviously it was for the best, because after this we got Daniel Craig's Bond Road to start, and let me just tell you, it's already a better start to the start to where this movie, Pierce Brosnan's Bond, ended off on. So that is Die Another Day, the worst James Bond movie ever made. So let's go ahead and move on to our next movie, which is Friday After Next. So yeah, around this time, Neil Line thought, we have a third film in the series. You know what we need to do? Make it Christmas. I mean, we need to make it Christmas because that's where the real money comes into play. Because they did it with this, they did it with Harold and Kumar, even though Harold and Kumar actually put another element to it that was actually pretty cool. This, it's an interesting decision to go, and I'll give it this. It's slightly better than Next Friday is. So in this one, you have Craig and Day Day, once again played by Ice Cube and Mike Epps. They're getting jobs as security guards at a shopping center when a robber dressed as Santa Claus breaks into their apartment, steals their presents, and the rent money that is to be given to their landlady. And the film takes place over the course of a day where they're working at the convenience, the strip mall as security guards, and then they have this big party with Money Mike from the last movie, played by Cat Williams. Some other John Witherspoon's back in this one. So is Anna Marie Horsford. They add in people like Ricky Smiley as the robber, Samore as Cookie, who was basically was Elroy's latest girlfriend after he and Sugar broke up in the last movie. Joel McKinnon Miller, you've seen him on Brooklyn Nine-Nine, is in here as one of the cops. Terry Crews, one of his early film roles. There are a lot of elements of this film where it probably should not work, but truth be told, this is the one Friday movie that I watch after the first one that I watch more than I do with Next Friday. Because Next Friday wasn't a bad movie per se, but it was your typical comedy sequel. Let's just do the same story we did the last time around. At least this one has a little bit of an edge to it. They're not waiting for Tiny Zeus Lister to come back and kill Craig. No, this time they're going after this Santa robber, and actually leads to a lot of the really funny moments of the movie. Like there's a great moment where towards the end where Craig and Day Day finally get to the Santa and they beat the hell out of him, and there's this wild chase all throughout the neighborhood trying to catch him, and it goes through these chaotic, insane levels of situations where you have Mike Epps as a dual role, who's this old guy who's just going gun crazy at one point during the whole thing. And it's just like so much happens in this movie that I'm not going to say it's on par with the first Friday movie. The first Friday movie was just a simple film, a simple day in the life of this guy who, he loses his job on his day off and has to eventually fight off against the big bully of the neighborhood, and also has to basically decide whether or not to take one route, which could be devastating to the neighborhood, or just do something completely different. And it's one of those movies that still holds up, and it features maybe one of my favorite movie scenes of all time that I've talked long and hard about already. But But in this movie here, it's more simple. It's more on the same levels as Next Friday, but I think it's done a lot better than Next Friday is. I think it's a film that does try to do things that are very different compared to the last movie. They aren't just rehashing the same plot over again. There's more laughs in this movie, I think. It's not a classic by any means necessary, but in terms of the Friday films in general, this is probably the one I watch more than Next Friday. Next Friday I don't think is bad, but this is the film that I just feel like is slightly better than the last movie. It's, again, not a classic by any means, but in terms of all three films, this is probably the second most watched one I've watched out of all three of them. This is the one I would say, I think you do get a lot more in this particular film than you do with Next Friday, but no matter what I say, Friday I think is still the topper. Nothing else will really top that. And honestly, nothing else from the series really ever topped that. The Friday animated series they did with about a couple years later was really lackluster and didn't even feel like a real Friday series in general, except the fact they got John Witherspoon back in that series. And Ice Cube's always been talking about going back and doing another Friday film. I mean, I would have said no before I saw Barbershop: The Next Cut, which is one of those sequels where, I talk about all the time how I have this thing about comedy sequels. If you wait too long after doing the last one, it probably is just time to, stop, quit while you're ahead. Kind of like with what Ben Stiller just recently said something about Zoolander 2, where he thought that people wanted Zoolander 2 so badly, but, somebody needed to tell him that, people wanted the Zoolander movie 2 years after the first movie came out, not 15 years later. You gotta strike while the iron is hot. And with the Friday films, they struck while the iron was hot for the most part. Trying to do another one over 20 years later seems like it's really, really going to be hard to top what you did before. Unless, but then again, he did this with Barbershop: The Next Cut, and Barbershop: The Next Cut actually turned out to be a really good movie, even though that was a 12-year gap between films. So maybe it's not possible. Maybe it's not impossible to actually do this. Not impossible. I've just turned into Ralph Wiggum from The Simpsons. Me fail English? That's impossible. I mean, it's like I've been saying, it's not impossible that this could actually work out, considering what he did with Barbershop. So, and I also heard he's going to try to get Chris Tucker back for this one. So maybe it's got a shot. Maybe if it actually happens, I'm surely going to check it out to see if it actually works. But if it doesn't come out and actually happen, I'm not going to mind it so much. But like I said, Friday After Next, I think it's still the second best of the Friday films in general. I think it's fun for what it is. Don't go in there expecting, don't expect to go in there looking for the first movie again. Expect a sequel that is better than the last film, though. I'll give you that. So with that said, let's go ahead and take a look at the retread. Let's do another Dead Poet Society movie. Instead of Robin Williams, though, let's get Kevin Kline to do it. This is The Emperor's Club. Okay, stop me if you haven't heard this plot yet. Kevin Kline plays William Hundred, a passionate and principled classics professor who finds his tightly controlled world shaken and inexplicably altered when a new student walks into his classroom. What begins as a fierce battle of wills gives way to a close student-teacher relationship, but results in a life lesson from Hundred that will still haunt him for a quarter of a century later. Sound like Dead Poet Society much? I hope so, because it's literally Dead Poet Society. It's literally Mona Lisa Smile. It's literally Dangerous Minds. It's literally every single movie that you've seen about this one guy coming into a school and basically having to come in and essentially motivate them, get them to another level. It says something when Farewell, Mr. Bunting, the Saturday Night Live sketch they did parodying Dead Poet Society, is probably one of the better post-Dead Poet Society things to come out since that movie came out. I mean, every single time they do one of these movies, it's always the same thing. It's always the same plot. It's always the same rundown of everything that's going on. You could put as many good actors in this movie as you can, which there are a lot of good actors in here. I mean, what do I need to say more about Kevin Kline? He's a fantastic actor. He's won an Oscar for a good reason. He's a fantastic actor. You've got M. Biff Davis, Patrick Dempsey, Emil Hirsch, Ron Morrow, Edward Herrmann. Fantastic cast overall here. Stephen Culp. I mean, great cast. Good director. Michael Hoffman's made a couple of really good movies in the 90s. Restoration and One Fine Day. Neil Tolkien, a decent writer in general. Wrote some fun comedies back in the day. License to Drive, Richie Rich, and an uncredited writing bit on Unbroken. Although he did write Jury Duty, the Pauly Shore film, which... yeah, that probably is not a good sign. Maybe that was the sign going forward that this is probably not going to work out. But he's made some decent stuff, but this film, it's just... Oh, and Jesse Eisenberg's also in here, too. One of his early film roles, but... I don't know. I mean, I guess I could say the movie isn't terrible, but I think it's mostly because the actors are giving it their all. I mean, Kevin Kline will usually give it his all no matter what he's in, but it's the same story we've seen done over and over again. They don't do anything different except change the time period, change a few little lines here and there to make it feel like it's completely new and original, when it really is not. It's just a film that just doesn't work in general. It's a movie that is just another one of these movies, like A Dead Poet Society, like A Dangerous Minds, like A Freedom Riders, you know. We've seen these type of movies over and over and over again, and it just never... This movie never does anything new or different with it to make it stand out on its own. Just like, have you seen Dead Poet Society? You've clearly seen this movie. I mean, sadly, that's the only thing I can say about this movie, is that the performances are probably the best thing about it, but it's not enough for me to say that you should definitely check this movie out in general. So... yeah, not much more to say about that one. That is The Emperor's Club. And Paul Dano's also in the movie, too. I just saw that there. Harris Yulin's it. See, they got good people in here. It's just not enough to save the film when you know what direction it's going to go in with the end. So, just wanted to throw that last in there, because I literally just saw that when I looked at the credits here. The Emperor's Club. So with that said, that wraps up another edition of Time About the Movies. We'll jump into Thanksgiving weekend next time around with 5 movies, including Disney's animated feature Treasure Planet, which was not a big hit when it came out. It did eventually go on to have a cult following in the long run. Another film that had somewhat of a cult following for maybe different reasons, Adam Sandler's animated 8 Crazy Nights, which you might generally be surprised at how I feel about this one once I talk about it. We also have the James Cameron-Steven Soderbergh collaboration with George Clooney in it, Solaris, Wes Craven's They, and we also have Extreme Ops. So, 5 films in general to look at next time, and we'll take a look at those films on the next episode. But until then, thank you so much for watching, and if you want to see more videos like this, please hit the plays on the next page, check out the previous episode, and also don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button if you want to see more videos like this on this channel. So, with that said, I am off. I will see you guys next time, and until then, as always, take care.